Welcome to Talking with the Translators. In the last interview of the current series, we're going to explore specialization in translation. With me in the studio to discuss this subject are Cinzia D'Amico and Mark Elliott, two freelance translators. Cinzia has been working as a freelancer since 1993 and Mark since 2005. Welcome to you both. Can we take it as read that without a specialization you cannot function as a freelancer?
Yeah,
Yes,
definitely.
Okay, and then can I immediately ask you what your own areas of specialization are?
I specialise in the automotive field, in aviation, Formula One and SAP, which is an inventory management software program.
And Mark?
I specialise in digital broadcasting and ICT, which is information communications technology.
Okay. In broad terms, I think we can say that there are two types of individual entering the translation profession. On the one hand, there are people like Nick Phone, who has a particular specialisation or qualifications in chemical engineering. Yeah? So his is not an uncommon phenomenon. And the other type of individual are people like ourselves or yourselves who have a general humanities background but have acquired specialist knowledge sets as you have advanced through your career. So I'd rather like to look at that because both of you are in this situation. You're fundamentally humanities students who've developed this, these technical expertises. Yeah? So can we start by going back to your first degree and telling our audience about the extent to which this helped you to develop your specializations?
I did a degree in translation in Italy, and although it touched on various fields, so we translated different texts of specialised fields, it didn't actually concentrate on a particular one. So it just gave a general overview of all the fields that we might be dealing with when we entered the translation world.
And Mark, in your case, you studied German.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I studied German and area studies, and there were different modules on the course. And I focused mainly on economics, and part of that was there was a section on international law, and that has prepared me to some extent.
Okay. Neither of you have mentioned research skills. That's a key agenda item at undergraduate level. Do you feel your own experiences in that context helped you to develop those skills, which you've clearly then taken forward?
Definitely, because that's exactly my case. When I started working as a freelancer, I didn't have a specialisation, but once I started getting work in particular fields, I started doing research to learn terminology and to learn how things work, like especially in the automotive field. So research has helped a lot, like reading magazines or buying books specifically on, I don't know how a clutch works or things like that. It definitely helps having that curiosity of going and looking for the information. Yeah.
In your case, Mark, as I understand it, you moved from your undergraduate degree in German straight into digital broadcasting or into that industry. Is that the case?
I actually worked for a different company in between, which gave me more of a commercial awareness before I moved into digital broadcasting.
And what drew you then, and how long were you in the industry?
Just over 5 years, and it was mainly driven by my interest in technology.
Okay. And then straight from digital broadcasting to translation?
I actually worked in the German department for the company, and I had the opportunity to translate several contracts. And from that, the interest grew in translation, and considered doing it full time.
And in your case, Cinzia, as I understand it, you studied in Italy, moved to the UK, set up shop as a translator without any specialisation and took it from there.
That's right. I finished my degree, came over to England and started working as a freelance translator. And then it all developed from there. So the first, let's say, 6 months, I concentrated on marketing myself, sent over 100 CVs to translation companies. Only got 2 replies in writing, saying that they allowed my name to their database. However, in the following months, I then received work from other translation companies who hadn't replied, but who still added my name to their database. And then it just went on from there. The pile of invoices started growing. And after about 2 years, I was able to make a good living out of it.
Okay.
and I stopped doing the teaching that I was doing to complement my income while I was starting
Can I pick
up
up your point about the 2 years?
Yes.
My take on this is that the 2 years divides up into the first 6 months of startup, and then by the time that 2 years have elapsed, you're well on your way to operating profitably. Yeah. So could you tell me, Mark, what you were doing in these first 2 periods, the 6 month and the 2 year startup?
Well, my take on that is slightly different because I did the MA in translation, and during that time I started fostering contact with the existing contacts that I had and just getting a general feel for what fields were out there. So when I finished the MA, I was more or less ready to launch, and literally in the first couple of weeks spent just marketing myself, sending emails out, and I was up and running within about 6 weeks.
And just to go back to you, Cinzia, you were doing all these things, you were marketing yourself, you were responding to requests for translation from clients, and how was then the specialisation shaping up in these first 2 years?
Well, when I started receiving the work in a particular field that I thought I could actually handle, I started taking the work on and then studying and researching it and building it up that way.
And presumably a key aspect of that was building up glossaries and your terminologies to cope with that. Yeah.
You might get client-specific glossaries directly from the client, but when you don't, you just have to base it on the volume of work you've got, just go through the whole job and pick up all the technical words and build up your own glossaries.
And were you getting help from outside agencies of any kind, business or professional bodies?
No, it was all self-driven. It was all, again, through my own research. I was aware of organisations, translation organisations like the ITI or IOL. I researched them as well, but I decided to just rely on my own
Okay. And what was it like in your case, Mark?
Well, during the MA, I had the opportunity to visit the Enterprise Centre at the university I was at, and they just give me general advice on starting up a business and putting together a business plan. And then after that, I pretty much knew what I wanted to do as soon as I left the MA, so I didn't seek any external advice after that, and just developed the business myself.
Okay. Can we look at sources of work now? Fundamentally, there are 2 kinds. There are direct clients and translation agencies, which provide work. How is it in your case?
Well, I prefer to work with translation companies, which I find is a more cost-effective way to operate, as they're doing the advertising for you, so you don't have that overhead. And also, it's a wider source of work, because you get work from different sources, and also a variety of work, because each translation company will be dealing with different fields. Yeah. I do have direct clients as well, but it's a smaller amount compared to my translation company's work.
And in your case, Mark?
Yeah, I've got a higher amount of direct clients, which I prefer to work with direct clients, because I get that one-to-one contact, and I get to understand their businesses a bit better. But in terms of the work ratio, I get the majority from agencies. Yeah. And there are agencies and there are agencies, and the ones I work for are smaller, so there's a more personal contact there. And again, the variety of text is it keeps you on your toes. It's quite interesting.
Okay, and a last question on the first 2 years, this sort of catch-22 scenario that is often alluded to, whereby you have the qualifications, but equally important are years of experience. And as we learnt in the last interview with Dan Peachy, his particular agency specifies 5 years as a minimum period of prior experience. Did you encounter that as an issue, and how did you tackle it?
I didn't actually have that problem, or at least not directly. As I said, I received 2 replies from when I sent all the CVs, and they just told me that they were adding me to their database, but nobody actually said, oh, you also need this amount of years of experience to do it. I think the fact that I had a degree in translation was maybe enough for them at the time to consider me competent in doing my job.
And in your case, Mark?
Yeah, I'd say again, I haven't come across any barriers in terms of time limits.
Okay, in our first interview with Nick Phone, I used this expression, the language service provider, to indicate that translators offer translation, of course, but there are many translation-related activities and language-related activities. So could I ask you how important these, what you might call additional skills, are to your work as a freelancer?
I think they're very important because, again, they add variety to the work you do. Obviously, being a translator is quite a lonely profession where it's just you and the screen all the time. So doing other things like interpreting or other jobs, other skills that actually give you the interaction with people is quite important.
And Mark?
Well, I think I don't do any interpreting. I purely work from home. But I guess the skills, I separate them into, essential skills, the core skills you should have, translating and proofing, and then building on IT skills to offer customers different solutions.
So is this, as Cinzia has said, variety, or is this financially significant in your cases?
For me, it's mainly variety,
Right.
and having the interaction with people, like going into a recording studio and just dealing with the recording stuff, or interpreting and meeting people that way.
Yeah. And I think it's variety for me, and even though I don't get out, it's just the challenge really of getting to know how to use these different systems.
Yeah. Once again, we've touched on technology, but we've never really defined it. So what does technology mean to you as a freelancer?
It means a lot because it means that you're keeping yourself up to date to what is happening in the translation world, any developments, and it also makes you more employable because by being able to translate, for example, different file formats like PowerPoint or Excel, obviously once you get work in that particular format, you don't have to say no. You can take the job on and do it, and it's important, and so much so that when the internet started up, like establishing itself, I taught myself to translate directly into HTML, so that all the client had to do was to take my work, put it on the FTP site, and there it was done. So once again, it's less work for them, and you know exactly what you're doing, and so it's quite important for me.
And Mark?
Yeah, it's definitely very important to me as well. The whole translation industry for me is being driven by technology. Sometimes it's out of the control of the translation world. You just got to adapt to what the commercial world or the business world wants. But certainly without the technology, I wouldn't be able to offer most of the things that I do or accept many of the jobs because it's a prerequisite, really.
And does that now have implications for CPD, continual professional development? Is that the way you drive that, or are there other activities you engage in order to keep up to date with developments in the translation world?
Well, I'm a member of the Chartered Institute of Linguists and the ITI, so I keep my finger on the pulse of the translation world through those organisations. But in terms of CPD, it's an ongoing process, really. I haven't gone to any official courses since I completed my MA, but rather it's been an ongoing process of mastering the system, the computer systems or the applications that help me translate and deliver solutions to the clients.
Cinzia?
Yeah, I'm an accredited member of the ATA, which is the American Translators Association, and once again I agree with Mark saying that it's just a way of it's a continuous development, and so being a member of the ATA gives me the chance to read their magazine or website with all the new developments in the translation world. I also take part in webinars about different translation subjects. And sometimes also network with other translators, either at social events or on websites where they've got peer groups where you can just communicate that way.
And my final question invites you to identify a significant development in your career as a translator. What would you say in response to that prompt?
Well, I think having been able to establish myself as a freelance translator in this competitive world is quite a major development, especially with a language combination which is not that exclusive, English to Italian. So I find that quite an achievement, and that's what I believe.
And Mark?
Well, I think again it's an ongoing thing. There aren't any key moments, but I think the fact that I started off with a certain amount of customers and I've retained those customers today, that's an achievement, and the business is growing. So.
Okay, thanks. So thank you both for joining me today. Two quite distinctively different profiles of specialisation have emerged from our discussion, which I'm sure our audience will find both reassuring and encouraging. Thank you both.
Thanks.